Second Nature, episode number 53. Aaron Lutzi, what up, bro?
Just grinding it out, man. Here we go. Time for another one. This is exciting though. I'm really just anxious kind of to catch up with you on a bunch of stuff because my brain has just been on fire the last week and we've had some really interesting conversations and I just want to dig back into some of it.
Yeah, okay, cool. We've got a huge docket here today, so let's dive right in here before or after I set it up. We're going to do just some Second Nature housekeeping to start. We're going to do a recap, at least on our Robin Thurston conversation, maybe some other takeaways from Simon Freeman, but we've been on a bit of a heater, I feel like, on the pod recently, and we appreciate the feedback that we've received. We're going to talk about your upcoming trip to come see me here in NorCal, Lucy. We're going to be hanging out in person. We'll talk about that. We got a sick job of the week. We're bringing another one of our AMA questions into the convo here today, we think. We got a Galaxy Brain to get to and a BPC. So locked and loaded. Aaron, you start us off here with some Second Nature housekeeping, some activity in Slack. What's going on there?
Yeah, you know what? We have been on a bit of a heater, but actually looking at the list of people that have committed to talking to us over the next couple of weeks, like the hits are going to keep coming. And I'm actually really excited I'm excited for all of them. They're going to be some really good ones. They're kind of all over the place in a way that they're all valuable, but they're coming from different parts of the industry to come talk to us. We got some really cool stuff up our sleeve. But let's talk about the Slack channel, which we've got quite a few people in there already. And every single time I open up a Slack, it's just kind of bonkers, right? Like more people coming from all kinds of different parts of the industry, all bringing value. Yesterday, I opened it up and Melissa from Scratch had actually created a channel to collaborate between brands. So it's not just us like posting our stuff, but there are legitimate, amazing people from the outdoor industry sharing knowledge and partnership. And just like, I think she posted a job today as well. I mean, there's some really cool stuff going on there, even without us really having anything to do with it, which makes me really happy.
What a brilliant idea. So, Melissa Allen from Scratch Labs created the Let's Collaborate channel in Slack. So, not only opportunity for brand to brand collaboration, but also person to person. So, if you're listening, jump in, make sure you do join. I see there's not many people in this channel, so we got to make sure everybody's invited and included. But
Yeah. Yep.
anyway,
There's also an intellectual property channel that Ian Gates spun up. So if you've got IP questions, you get access to Ian. I guess I don't know. Is he going to send us a bill afterwards, or
no,
but yeah,
good deal flow for our guy Ian Gates, who again we can't recommend highly enough for everybody who's needing to protect our IP.
the other thing that we made a change on in the Second Nature Slack is that we had that AMA channel where we sourced a bunch of questions for episode 50. And there was so much in there that we wanted to still talk about. And I felt like even though we didn't get to it in 50, we could still include it in upcoming podcasts. But also, since everybody's already in there, we should make it where if anybody has podcast topics or additional questions that they want to throw into future podcasts, we should have a place for that. So what used to be the AMA 50 channel is now podcast dash topics. So if you're already in the Slack, make sure you go find that one. I'll put a link to that stuff in the discussion so everybody can find it. But we've made a couple little tweaks to just optimize the Slack channel for everybody that's in it. And I think there's really kind of something for everybody that comes in there, whether you're just looking to connect with other people or you're looking for a job or you need some advice. There's just so much going on already in the span of like what, a month?
Yeah, Aaron, I had a Galaxy Brain about Slack also.
Let's hear it.
Obviously, our number one piece of feedback, as we've mentioned a couple of times, is people saying that while they're listening to the podcast, while they're out doing their exercise or in their daily work commute, that they're shouting at their steering wheel or at the clouds, at the trees with their perspective on whatever topic we're dissecting here on the podcast. So maybe we need to create a shouting at the clouds channel for people to vent and provide real-time feedback while they're listening to the podcast. What do you think?
I'm here for it. Shout into the abyss that is going to be the Slack channel. Go for
Shout into the abyss channel. I like that.
it. I'm here for it. No, that's great. One other thing that I'm posting in the discussions tab as well. I think we could do a little bit of a Portland meetup. You're going to be up here for a couple days, and I think it'd be really fun to have everybody that listens to the pod that's in the area just get together. Details definitely TBD, but just kind of gauging interest right now. So if you are in Portland but you're not in Slack, maybe just jump in there and let us know, or find another way to get a message to us. But I think it'd be cool to just, I've gone out and grabbed coffee with a bunch of people that listen to the pod just to chat with them and get ideas and share things back and forth. And I think it'd be cool just for everyone else to have a chance to get together in like a slightly larger group. So
Yeah. And so just to date check things, I'm going to be in Portland December 21st through the 26th with my wife and family. We do Christmas up there basically every year. So it'll be right around the actual holidays. So maybe on the 21st or 22nd, we could get together for a bit of a happy hour mix and mingle networking session for the PDX residents. So again, as Aaron said, keep your eye on Slack. We'll include information in the newsletter too. We've also kicked around the idea of doing a live podcast. We'll see if we can thread that needle here in December. But at some point, given the fact that I come to Portland several times a year, you also come to the Bay Area at least a few times a year. So we got to start putting some of these IRL meetups on the calendar.
absolutely, I'm here for it.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, that's some quick housekeeping for second naturalists here to get the show off the ground. Let's start with some feedback that we got on the outside episode and just some of our personal reflections on our chat with Robin Thurston. I would say number one, I loved where we started, right? And this is, I think, what we are trying to achieve here with Second Nature. You teed Robin Thurston up with the question, what does the outdoor industry need? And to paraphrase his answer, it was effectively, we just need more collaboration. We need more positive sum thinking. We need less divisiveness and criticism, which has obviously become a hallmark of the digital landscape in the modern era. We got some feedback from some Second Nature listeners that maybe felt like we didn't push back enough. So, Aaron, maybe tell me your quick high level thoughts or reactions on both the episode and the feedback.
I thought it was actually, I came into that discussion really not sure how things were going to go. And I came out of it with a bit more respect for what Robin is trying to do. And I think, you know what, if you think about it, this is a guy, let's just like take outside out of it for a second, right? This is a guy that sold Map My Fitness, Map My Run, whatever, to Under Armour for probably a very large chunk of money. And then he went to go work at Under Armour for long enough that he probably got decent stock options. So this guy is sitting on like Scrooge McDuck money. And the thing that he wanted to do with that Scrooge McDuck money was dump it back into the outdoor industry. And I got to respect that. I think that when you listen to him talk about everything, he's still assembling this thing. And I never want to criticize someone when they're in the process of assembling what they're going to do. But I think what is important for us to give him the space to really like share his vision, and time is going to tell if he comes through on it. And if he doesn't come through on it, well, that's on him. And we know where he was at least trying to go. I think business is hard. We talk about that all the time. And accomplishing what he's trying to accomplish is very challenging. And that was one of the questions I had asked, like, is this user acquisition, or do you really see an opportunity to put this stuff together? Because one thing that I still kind of struggle with after that conversation is you are effectively trying to change the behavior of a lot of people. And other thing I kind of wonder, he talked about how, more people use Map My Run than anything else by like a large margin. But I kind of wonder, are those the same people that are reading outside? Like, is it like, yes, it's a big audience, but is it the audience? Do they care about what's getting posted on Pink Bike? Do they care about what's being posted on Triathlete or on Free Trail for that matter? That's the one question that I'm not sure if anybody's really answered yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big number, but is it the right number?
Yeah. All right. So a couple of things. I think it's important to just like level set the context here because as I said in the podcast, I've listened to every single interview that Robin has ever done and have been inspired by his career and have followed closely what he's been trying to do with Outside. Those who have followed it closely will remember that it started as Pocket Outdoor Media, which Robin bought, which was a collection of outdoor and healthy lifestyle publications that then absorbed Outside and rebranded. As they were acquiring a lot of these publications, which I'm sure there were several that were distressed. It was also the height of the frothiest acquisitions market in recent memory. So, in all likelihood, it was a seller's market, not necessarily a buyer's market, meaning outside may have overpaid. I have no inside information, but given the market dynamics at the time, it was just a hard time to be acquiring businesses that then went into the teeth of the market slowdown that was, initiated by the COVID pandemic. So, giving them the benefit of the doubt there, as I said in our conversation with Robin, I view myself as the archetype outside subscriber, somebody who is happy to pay for content, especially content that is really relevant to my passion, that being trail running. They own Trail Runner Magazine and Fastest Known Time. Plus, I use Gaia almost every single day. That alone is worth a subscription for me. But when the occasional really cool mountain bike article or triathlon article or skiing article gets posted, I also have access to those pieces of, print writing or digital writing that I would never actually pay for myself. So I view myself as a beneficiary of the ecosystem that he's trying to create. The question is, how many of me are there? Because that's going to determine whether this business model, which is subscription led, will work. But one of the things that he said on the podcast here too is that they are hoping that it's more of a SaaS platform company, not necessarily a advertising based media company in its next iteration. That is a thing that will be very hard to execute, but that will eventually, if they're successful, be the thing that turns outside into, a very successful and very lucrative business. That's going to be very difficult to say or to figure out. One thing that I wanted to tee you up on, Aaron, because it's relevant to something we've talked about, is he said, can we be the Patreon or the Substack for the outdoor industry? Obviously, I had the galaxy brain. Somebody's got to create the Patreon for the outdoor industry. So this is the transition from media company to platform company. Do you have comments on that?
I think they have a lot of work to do, and I'm really curious. They've already bitten off a pretty big chunk, satisfying creators and luring them away from existing platforms like YouTube that are already working to go to an unproven one. And again, like, it's not just the creator behavior, but it's also the user behavior. Can they demonstrate that they can actually put eyeballs on the people that are coming over there to deliver that content and make that interesting? Whether it's an athlete trying to do the Patreon thing or a creator who's already making content somewhere else and having success, like, the bar for them to replace Patreon, to replace Substack, is that they have to be actually better than either one of those. And one of the things that Patreon and Substack have going for them is not only do they have an ecosystem already in place and momentum, but the users are also there, that, their credit card's already in there and everything.
Yeah.
So I think they have to sort of demonstrate that they can pull that off. To test this hypothesis, I started posting. I created a Super Rider account on Outside Online, and I started posting every single day to just, like, all right, let's see what happens if I engage for a month straight or a couple months straight. I've got all kinds of content that I can easily drop in there. Let's see if this works. And if it does, then that's a really great case. But I think it's like you're trying to fight a war on so many different fronts here. You're trying to get users to come over to engage with more media. You're trying to get more creators in there that are gonna you're trying to connect the dots between like 30 different companies. I mean, there's a lot going on. And again, I think, time is going to tell. I don't want to criticize somebody in the middle of the assembly, but I also think you picked out a very, very difficult problem.
Yeah. Which it feels like he relishes. As we talked about the complexity of the business, it was almost like he lit up and said that he actually enjoyed the challenge of the complexity of the business, even if some of the team might find it overwhelming. I think he made that clear that sometimes the outside team, finds the complexity challenging, which I can totally relate to. But I don't know, just building off this before we move on, something you said earlier, we operate with the philosophy that hashtag business is hard. And one of the things that we try and do here on Second Nature is talk honestly about things that are happening in the industry and things that are happening in the news, while also acknowledging that fundamental truth of business, that it's incredibly hard and people are going to screw up. I'm not entirely sure what the core criticism is of Outside at this point, other than that they sort of rolled up a bunch of these publications. I know they've been through a couple rounds of layoffs, but that's not unusual in the current employment landscape. So beyond that, I'm not entirely sure why certain people have been critical. But Robin also made it clear that this was part of his first answer to your question, that they've been getting some inbound criticism too. So what we try and do here at Second Nature is give people an opportunity to talk about their brands and their businesses, and all we can push back or challenge our guests in some way, but really what we want to do, and I think as it relates to Outside, we should all be rooting for their success as we should be rooting for the success of everybody. And so really appreciative of Robin for coming on and talking openly about Outside, and certainly a lot that our audience can learn from. Final thought for me, once we logged off with Robin, he went through the trouble of trying to get us set up on the activity feed with
Yep.
Outside, which I thought was really cool. And one of the things that he said is Free Trail specifically, and Super Rider also to some degree, could be seen as competitors to the Outside product, because we're consumer facing trail running and mountain biking digital media properties, and they already own Trail Runner magazine, Pink Bike, etc. But he made it explicitly clear, I want to amplify your businesses on our platform. Really cool, really interesting, and positive sum thinking, which is where he started our interview and where we started this
Yeah.
discussion here today.
I hope that we can be a case study for that working out, which is exactly what I was saying. I'm posting on there. I'm going to give them, and let's see what comes through with this whole thing. I'm rooting for these guys too. I definitely came into the conversation not really sure how I felt about everything. I think that when you acquire a bunch of other brands and it's pretty clear that you're trying to assemble something, kind of big like that, does trust come with the existing relationships? You buy Pink Bike, do you automatically get the trust of every Pink Bike user? Unlikely, because you assume this position of the acquirer,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that Outside's main job, outside of connecting the dots, is also going to be building trust. And what's the line of it gets you build trust by the drop and lose it in buckets, right?
Trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets.
Yeah.
I think that
So
might be like a Charlie Munger thing. Anyway, big thanks to Robin for coming on the show. I definitely want to have him back on a fairly regular occasion, every year, every 6 months, just to check in on how things are going. He clearly has no problem being transparent and open, which I definitely appreciate, especially if he is catching criticism in certain subsections of the internet. But
yeah.
Anyway, really fun conversation. Appreciate his willingness to come on and talk about it. Lutzi goes to NorCal. When's your flight, bro?
Sunday. I'll be there 3 p.m. So we're hanging out.
Yeah, we're going to hang out. Tell the people what you're up to.
Okay, so I talked about this on a couple episodes prior, but basically where I'm trying to figure out from a content specific standpoint, obviously we've got plenty of irons in the fire, but when it comes to mountain bike content for Super Rider, I've had to do everything myself. And now I'm working on the very first ever project where I'm finally going to have some help. My buddy Paige is coming, and then Ryan Thrower is going to jump in and help out as well. And we are going to do sort of this idea of Bourdain on bikes. What if you had a couple days in a spot where it's not necessarily about the bike riding only, but it's who are the people here? Where do I get coffee before the ride? Where do I get burritos after the ride? What else is there to do here besides ride bikes? If I was going to come to San Francisco, where's the closest mountain bike trail, and why should I go there? What's it all about? I feel like there's some really interesting stories to tell because there's no shortage of POV trail footage on the internet, but there's not a lot of context and depth when it comes to telling the story of different regions. And that's what this project is going to be about, and hopefully the first of many. Now, what's kind of interesting about this is that not only am I going to do this project, but also I've figured out a way that I could fund this project where I'm not just booking my own flight and, put outlaying cash like I did on the road trip last year or this past summer. I'm working with the tourism board in the San Francisco Peninsula to put this whole thing together. They obviously have a vested interest in increasing the visibility of that area and specifically all the trails and outdoor stuff that's there. What a lot of these tourism boards are doing, they bring in all kinds of lifestyle influencers, people that do like the food and drink and the hotel and all the non-sports things. But I stumbled across this piece of data that basically said that when people are going somewhere for a sporting reason, where they're going to ride bikes or whatever, they actually end up staying there longer. And that drives their decision of where they're going to go. And that was a relatively easy sell to a group whose number one goal is to get people to come to the area and stay at hotels in the area. So a tourism board, if you didn't know, is actually funded by that tourism tax at the bottom of all the hotel folios that you get.
Ah,
And so their whole goal is just to get people to stay places longer. And so to have that piece of data is like, this is why people come here and this is why people stay longer. We should probably make content about this, was like a pretty succinct package to put together. So got to work with Second Nature listener and old friend of mine, John Paradigm, just an awesome guy that we definitely got to get on the pod at some point. He's like an OG Red Bull guy. We got all kinds of stories to dig into. But he and I have been working together on this for a little bit, and I'm really excited about it. I used to live in Pacifica, so I'm kind of going back home in a way, but I'm also going to get a chance to like explore a little bit more depth into the mountain bike storytelling that I've been kind of trending towards all year.
mm. So John Paradigm's job is to effectively empower people like you to influence an audience to potentially visit San Mateo County. Is that?
The entire San Francisco peninsula, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably generalizing it. John's probably just like face palming right now, but yeah, like the team there, their goal is just to share as much information and help, the local economy thrive. And there's so many cool things. Like one of the things that I think about a lot when I was putting together the plan for this whole thing, what are the histories and the mysteries of this area? What are
The
the little,
histories and the
right?
mysteries. What a brand. Let's go.
Like think about all the cool things that exist in this area. I learned a ton of stuff. There's a tree called the Methuselah tree that's like ancient, that's actually just outside of Half Moon Bay. Like there's all
Dude,
kinds of
don't.
crazy stuff.
This is spoiler alert for the Super Rider content that's going to be coming out.
Oh man, there's so much cool stuff. And I've learned a ton because that's sort of, again, like I'm just trying to add more depth than like we went somewhere and rode bikes. Like there's a time and place for that. But I feel like if we're gonna go a layer deeper, I think we could do something really special and really cool. So I hope that the audience responds to it. But I want to do this one and make it as good as I possibly can. And having Paige and Ryan there is going to make a huge difference in the quality. It's not just me and a GoPro anymore.
Yeah, so some inside baseball here. Ryan Thrower is my business partner on Free Trail. And he told me the other day, he's like, hey, I'm shooting with Lucy on Monday and Tuesday. I was like, what the hell, dude? Like, we work on Mondays and Tuesdays. So then I obviously had to give Aaron a hard time that he had stolen my right hand man to come do mountain biking content for him. But of course, it's all in the family. Ryan's a producer of this podcast too. So
Yeah. We'll probably talk about Second Nature at some point, so that counts as work, right? Or
yeah,
does he have to take PTO to come film
yeah,
with me?
PTO, as if we're professional enough to actually have stuff like that, or as if we actually take any time off.
Mhm.
Um,
Dude, I
that's really
think
cool though, man. And I really love this as an idea. And I don't know if I should say too much, but with TrailCon, we're sort of working on a similar angle. Obviously, the Lake Tahoe region operates mostly off a tourism based economy also, and so we're working on how do we integrate that a little bit into TrailCon. That's being led of course by my partner in that operation, Brendan Madigan, who lives there locally. But yeah, there's a lot of these geographies around the American West especially really benefit from adventure tourism. We'll remember back to our conversation with Maz, where he blew our minds saying that the bike tourism industry is $140 billion on its own. So for everybody in auxiliary sports, you could start galaxy brainstorming. That's a new term that we're
I
going
like
to
it.
coin here. Galaxy brainstorming, ways in which you can maybe to capitalize on or align incentives with local regions to go do some recreation, create some content, and have something that's supportive of your business.
It's gonna be good. It's
Good
gonna be really
stuff.
good. I think what I'm doing with the super rider stuff, you could easily do for running or really any other sport. It's about
Yeah,
getting people outside. It's about showing off a different thing. And there are literally thousands of tourism boards just like this that are interested in bringing more people to their area. And it's like sort of unlimited, which is exciting. Like if this one works out and we get the results that we think we're going to get, we'll be in good shape.
cool. Well, to be continued. We'll put the closing chapter on that story once you're done with it. And we would do a meetup while you're here, but this podcast won't even come out until after you leave. So we'll try the NorCal meetup some other time.
We'll make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, job of the week, and nobody is in a better position to sort of provide a job description and a synopsis of what would success look like in this given position at Whoop. You want to get things started here?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so basically for context, I had this job, but at Aura, which is probably Whoop's main competitor. I've got to imagine, right? So the job title is Senior Sports and Talent Marketing Manager. Just I'll quickly read the one line here. Let's see. They're going to serve as a vital liaison between Whoop and our athlete and talent ambassadors. In this role, you'll report to the global director of sports and talent marketing and collaborate closely with the sports marketing specialist. Your primary responsibility will be to nurture and maintain key relationships, helping to enhance Whoop's brand awareness, blah, 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 blah. So, really, what it is about finding athletes and talent ambassadors. I haven't heard it said that way before, but basically, athletes and non athletes that have big followings that can speak credibly about Whoop's product that you can actually build contracts with and also do seeding, which is basically giving product away to people that are relevant to utilize the product itself. This is a really fun job. I can confirm because part of it too is also identifying content opportunities and working closely with the social media team, which means that not only do you get to find talent to work with, but then you get to brainstorm ways to bring that partnership to life and kind of activate it through Whoop's content, which honestly, like the stuff they've put out in the past has been really good. And, they've run TV ads and stuff like that too. So there's a lot to work with in a role like this where not only can you explore a lot of different sports and work with elite athletes, but you can also put them in front of millions of people, which is valuable beyond what a contract would be.
So if you were applying for this job, how would you put yourself in position to get consideration?
Oh, well, I think
Just thinking from our audience's perspective here, because this seems like a sick job, and Whoop is a very interesting company.
Yeah, I mean, I would put this on the line as like the Red Bull athlete manager job that I had. Same thing, athlete marketing manager job that I had. It's sort of the same thing, right? Like, do you have a track record of identifying and activating talent? Can you bring creative concepts to life from start to finish? So, if you have a background in content specifically, I think it's like you have to have kind of one or the other. Have you worked with athletes in the past, or have you worked in content where you could take a subject and put them in a place where they could be successful? I think those
Mm-hmm.
are really the two angles that you'd probably have to have. You have to be able to, work with agents and stuff. You could come from a legal background, I suppose. Not necessary. Usually in a brand like this, they've got a legal team behind you where you just kind of like get the contract from them and get the signature put on it. I mean, I'm generalizing, but you don't
Yeah.
typically have to do the hard, heavy lifting on that. You've got a team behind you. So this one's really about, a lot of it's just kind of having like the zhuzh too. Like you got to be able to build relationships quickly with people. And especially nowadays, you have to sometimes build those relationships over the internet. You can't do it in person like you used to be able to do, or you have those relationships already that you could just be like, hey, here's 5 categories that you haven't even approached yet for Whoop. And here's how I'd see it happening.
The zhuzh factor. One little rabbit hole here, personal curiosity. When you had the role at Red Bull or Aura or both, you can decide, how often on a percentage basis are you dealing with the athlete or the talent directly versus their agent? And what are the pros and cons of
I would
each?
say that in every scenario, I'm dealing with the athlete almost exclusive, or every single time I dealt with the athlete, a certain percentage. The larger the athlete was, the more involved the agent would be with sort of the details of the deal or of the specific project that we were working on. But still, the athlete would be, call it 70% involved. There was never really a situation where you didn't have some level of relationship with the athlete, and the few situations where I didn't really have that, it never really worked out that great because you have to have that back and forth. That's the credibility. And the athlete's going to want to know a lot of the detail, the behind the scenes, like, hey, what should I be looking at here? And we, at Aura specifically, we could sit with an athlete and break down their data for them and bring them extra value beyond what they were getting from the product itself, right?
Mm,
And so I think that's one of the most important things when you work at any of these brands. Yeah, they can get value out of the product itself, but you typically have the ability to sort of supercharge that value, which is meaningful to the athlete. It's why they're using a product like Whoop or Aura, is because it's helping enhance their athletic performance. So if you can give them an extra 1% on top of that, that's pretty great.
very cool. I have another little rabbit hole that I'd love to tee you up on here quickly that we didn't anticipate including in the docket, but it makes me want to go there and it feels appropriate for today's episode. As you know, Aaron, I was in Hawaii 2 weeks ago for a Red Bull athlete summit, which was really cool in so many different ways and really drove home a lot of the things that I've learned from you. Actually, one of the main purposes of the summit was to do a brainstorming session on potential athlete projects that we could do. As our listeners will know, we have a long running theme on the difference between performance athletes and project athletes. And a couple of things really stuck out. Number one, Robbie Nash gave a presentation at this summit. Robbie Nash is now 61 years old. He's been a Red Bull athlete for like 35 years. He had a personal relationship with Didi, Red Bull's founder, and he's become kind of like the walking multi-decade symbol of what Red Bull is culturally. He famously drinks 3 to 5 Red Bulls every day by his own characterization. But one thing that he said that was really powerful and stuck with me was that Red Bull has like single handedly made non traditional sport viable in a lot of different ways. And it's kind of intuitive when you think about it, but I had never really explicitly downloaded that. But if you look at skateboarding, skiing, surfing, mountain biking, windsurfing in Robbie's case, like now breakdancing and everything else Red Bull's associated with, even like parkour and stuff, like those sports and those athletes, those sports wouldn't exist in the same way. And those athletes wouldn't have jobs in the same way without just the investment from one singular brand. And of course, it's a two-way street, right? That insight to really connect with those core communities is what built Red Bull's brand and has turned it into this multi-billion-dollar empire. I thought that was fascinating. Do you have any comments on it?
So many, so
Yeah.
many. And a clarifying point, they're getting a lot of credit right now for getting involved with breakdancing, but Red Bull has been involved with breakdancing for like 20 plus years. I mean, there was an event in Seattle 20 years ago called Lords of the Floor. BC1 has been around for decades. They've done a lot of really interesting music and dance stuff over the years that didn't really get as much shine as sort of the more exciting, like jumping out of space type stuff, but they've been involved with so many communities, just like you were saying, windsurfing. Who's investing in windsurfing if you're not, an endemic brand? The interesting thing is the approach to Red Bull as well. Obviously, they saw an opportunity there to reach a new community. And for a while there, it kind of felt kind of scorched earth of like, how can we introduce new people to the brand that we haven't talked to before. Famously, I'd signed a roller derby athlete, Lauren Much, at one point,
Right.
and that was a completely new scene for Red Bull to approach. And I thought that was really a fascinating time for Red Bull. You know, we worked with paddling in Hawaii. It was a really cool way to get regional, like super hyper regional, which was, yeah, it brought so much. And I think what's important too is that Red Bull not only sponsored the athlete, but they sponsored the events. So it wasn't just one athlete reaping the benefit from it. There were, you know, lots of people working on events and then being featured in the events who weren't athletes of Red Bull that were still getting, you know, deals from it. I mean, Red Bull Rampage is a great example, right? There's a lot of
Mm,
athletes that are not Red Bull athletes that are making or building the majority of their value for the year off of participation in a Red Bull event. Think
mm,
about Cameron Zink or Kyle Straight or any of those guys who compete in the event. Yes, they are legends in the sport. They've been around for a long time. They have a big following and everything, but the marquee event that everyone comes out to see them participate in is a Red Bull event. And if that event wasn't there, you'd have to work a lot harder to keep tabs on some of those guys.
hmm. The analog in trail running is that Solomon owns the Golden Trail World Series. And of course, it says Golden Trail World Series powered by Solomon, and there's branding when you're there physically at the events, but they do a really good job of incorporating athletes from all different brand teams. They recognize that it wouldn't have the same cultural and competitive impact if it was just an exhibition of Solomon athletes competing against each other. So, in some ways, Solomon is providing a platform for athletes from competitive brands to build careers, maybe in the same way that Red Bull is at Rampage and other events. Anyway, really cool. Another fun anecdote before we move off of this, but our audience will find this interesting. I just talked about it on my podcast with Killian last week, but Ian Walsh, legendary big wave surfer from Maui, was talking about how the athlete performance staff from Red Bull had encouraged him to sort of revisit his nutrition strategy during performance. In other words, when he goes out to Jaws and surfs for 6 hours, he was generally not like fueling his body. He was dealing with cramping and things like that. And in endurance sport, so in trail running, this carbohydrate revolution has really taken the whole sport by storm. And so it was hilarious. Ian was like talking about how the Red Bull APC team had told him to take 30 grams of carbohydrates an hour. And of course, I just like started laughing because in running, it's 100 to 120 grams of carbohydrates an hour now to really power you through these ultra distance trail running events. And that's why the Tour de France has gotten so fast. And like, obviously, the course record book for basically every race in trail running has been redefined, even in just like the last couple of years as a result of this carbohydrate revolution. So just really fun to see the overlap in terms of how sports science is touching sports that in general have very little to do with one another, and how this carbohydrate conversation, which is ubiquitous in my circle, is now bleeding into surfing.
Cross pollination
There
all
you
day.
go.
You know, this actually ties in really well with the galaxy brain concept that I wanted to share on the
See,
pod.
perfect
Can
segue.
can
Let's
we
go
jump
to
to
the
that?
galaxy
All
brain.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
All
but
right.
also I wanted to also say we should do like a deep dive on Robbie Nash at some point because I
Yeah.
don't know much about him, and I'm sure you could give us a good soliloquy. But it feels to me like because he owned Nash like a windsurfing company, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. It's massive. Yeah. Big
He
waterman.
said that he
Like,
sold it recently,
attaboy.
but
That's
anyway,
awesome.
it's an athlete who had his own business, right?
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah. I mean, that was ubiquitous with like all watermen, all sports, not just windsurfing, but they had stand-up boards and kites and all kinds of stuff. I mean,
rad.
we should have him on the pod.
We should.
I know a great business to business outdoor podcast that he could talk on.
That would be great. All right, Galaxy Brain.
Okay, hear me out. I've been thinking a lot. One of the questions from the AMA episode that we did, we had a question from Ryan Toomer who offered to give me $50 million, if I remember correctly. And I've been thinking a lot about, we've talked about the infinite game a lot. We talk about what it is that second nature is meant to do. Like, what is our purpose? What is our infinite game? And I've been thinking a lot about that lately in terms of our purpose, in my opinion, is that we are here to help the outdoor industry when it comes to giving people a platform to talk about what they're working on, but also to help raise the game of everybody who's in the outdoor industry in a meaningful way. Sometimes that's, the insights that we have from guests on the podcast or little nuggets of wisdom that you and I may share. Maybe it's from doing some of these in-person events where people meet up. Maybe it's the value that people get from the jobs channel on our Slack. Who knows? But I think overall, our goal is to contribute in a positive way to the outdoor industry in the growth of not only the brands, but also the kind of personal and at work growth for all the people that are working at the brands. And so I came up with this concept last night. It just in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, for brand camp. And brand camp is sort of something that came from something we did at Red Bull with the high performance team. Famously, there was someone who led high performance in the US. His name is Andy Walsh, and this guy's like a legend. He's basically the guy that talked Felix Baumgartner into jumping out of space. Um, but he's gone on since Red Bull to do all kinds of incredible stuff. I mean, like he's worked with all the big hitters all over the world. This guy's just amazing. But he used to do this thing at Red Bull called Glimpses. And Glimpses was this weekend thing that like was hard to get an invite to, even if you worked at Red Bull. And he would bring in some of the most insane people, not necessarily from sports, but just people on the absolute cutting edge of stuff. And if you got a seat in that room, your brain was just like melting out of your face for a solid 6 or 8 hours, because it was just like one person after another that was just like rocking your world with like stuff you hadn't even considered before.
Yep.
And in addition to that, there was a lot of kind of cross pollination, a lot of side discussions, just all kinds of value for the people that got invited to Glimpses. And it got me thinking, what would it look like to do brand camp where people from, even competing brands or whatever, they could all come together for maybe a weekend and just spend time having their minds just like melted and reshaping everything, bringing in people not necessarily from the outdoor industry, but that cross pollination concept of like, someone from the tech industry, someone from, gosh, I don't even know, maybe Andy Walsh himself coming in or wherever, but coming from the outside to just raise the game overall. And if you get invited to, Second Nature brand camp, all of a sudden you've got something really special to bring back to the brand, to bring back to your work.
Whoa. Wait, keep going. Keep going. So who would be the person who would come and attend brand camp specifically? Like
Literally,
they would apply?
we could work that part out. I think it has to be somebody that listens to Second Nature, of course. You'll have to answer some trivia that you're gonna have to go into the archives to get the answers for. But no, I mean, I think it's like, look, if our goal is to help people from the outdoor industry get even better and even sharper at what they're doing and innovate beyond, the current state of the outdoor industry, what better way than to let them look beyond the industry? I mean, that the podcast that we did with Travis from Red Bull Gaming had so much insight in it. But again, who in the outdoor industry is looking at gaming as a way forward? Nobody. But
Wow, dude. Holy, this might be the best Galaxy brand yet.
brand camp.
Ian Gates, please protect Second Nature brand camp ASAP. If you're listening, that is our IP attorney for everybody who's listening here. Super interesting idea. So let me regurgitate that back to, see if I understand you correctly. So people who work in the outdoor industry or who would aspire to work in the outdoor industry would apply to attend Second Nature brand camp, where we and an extended network of people who have built interesting careers in the industry could coach them up, and we'd have various maybe talks and panels, keynotes around an array of topics that would effectively help all of us up our game. Is that kind of how it's going to look?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God. And then all these people will go back to the businesses where they work or to the companies that they founded, ideally armed with new inspiration and experience and knowledge to help them be successful.
Yep.
Oh my God. This needs to happen.
I think this would be fun. And like you could play with this a little bit too.
Best galaxy brain yet. We have to. I don't know what the business plan here though is. Aside from this is dope and good for the
we,
brand.
we already have $50 million. We're good.
Oh, okay, so we're good.
No, well, that's what I was
Thanks,
saying.
Ryan Toomer.
we could play with this a little bit, right? Like we could rent out like a summer camp, like in the off season, and then have everybody come stay at like a camp, like
Yeah,
brand camp, but it's like at a camp. And so, yeah, maybe you have to rent your cabin or whatever, and that helps kind of offset the cost of the panel that's going to come in and host the sessions and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe it's not the most lucrative in terms of like for us, but I do think in terms of impact on the outdoor industry, what could we do that's sort of on brand for Second Nature, but would bring the most value?
yeah,
This is my best current idea.
yeah. A sort of related idea would be to do kind of like an incubator accelerator, like what Simon Freeman described in our
Yeah.
recent episode. And we just got a DM from Nico Lumo, who's done something similar in Europe. And, if there was some sort of incubator accelerator for founders and startups in the outdoor industry, that might be another interesting extension of Second Nature Brand Camp. TM emoji.
I mean, look at the result that you just got from doing basically that at Red Bull. You
Totally.
went to a location with a handful of other Red Bull athletes. You riffed on ideas. You heard from people that are like a couple steps ahead of you, and you came back more inspired than ever to like and re-energize and ready to rip. And I think we could do basically that. It kind of works every time. I mean, I've hosted a ton of those at Red Bull. We used to do this performing under pressure camp for athletes at Red Bull, where we'd bring in like Navy SEALs and throw them out into the ocean, and like they do all kinds of wild stuff to like break down the barriers that the athletes had to kind of push them into that next phase of their development. And I mean, it was incredible to watch these athletes go through. It was like a 4-day camp, and just like to see the progress that they made personally and professionally over that window was incredible. And you could
Man,
absolutely do that for the outdoor industry.
like I would personally pay to attend something like Brand Camp, which I think is a good indication that it should exist in the world. Anyway, all right, wow. Well, it seems like this AMA question is a good extension also here as we begin to move towards BPC. But Mark Jantosik left another good question in the AMA channel that we figured we'd introduce in today's episode. What he asks is, you all have mentioned maxing out your bandwidth multiple times in the last year. With the rising popularity of Second Nature, do you have any fears of how your primary business may impact the potential of this quote unquote side hustle? Again, thanks to Mark Jantosik. You want to go first, Aaron?
Sure. And shout out to everybody that put all these questions in the AMA. I think we've got enough to dig through, and there's a lot of other questions in here that I still want to get to that we didn't make it to, that I think we could just kind of work into upcoming episodes too. So if it's not in there already, feel free to add new stuff. But yeah, this is a really fun channel just to like tee up some extra topics and stuff.
Yeah.
The rising popularity of Second Nature. Do I have fears about how Super Rider is going to be impacted? Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think where I'm looking at most with all the stuff that's happening now, I want to be as congruent as possible with all my energy and effort. And when it comes to our secret side project that's only a couple weeks away from being announced, and this, there's a lot more congruency between those two things that will make it easier to put effort into that. That being said, if I can get Super Rider to a point where it could also be more efficient, and I can really focus in on just doing the things that are the most important, and I could maybe hire an editor or hire a filmer. This project with Paige and Ryan is sort of my first attempt at making that more efficient. So I think more than anything, the success of Second Nature is sort of a forcing function to become even more efficient with the other projects that I have to make sure that I can keep the momentum. There is sort of like that sunk cost fallacy of like, well, I've been doing Super Rider for 5 years and it's got
Yeah.
a big audience. Like, why I can't stop. But also, if the future of Second Nature and the future of Super Rider are on the same level, I don't want to give up either one. But I think if I could make Super Rider efficient and put that extra energy into Second Nature, it's probably worth it over time. And hopefully, the success of Second Nature, it gives me the ability to bring on some help with Super Rider.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, some inside baseball for our listeners here. It's gotten to the point where second nature, I effectively do nothing except for record the podcast. I'm sorry, Aaron. And he and I have had many conversations of me like flailing, like, dude, I can't do this. I need help. I'm freaking totally overwhelmed. Aaron does all the show notes, puts all the show together. Ryan does the audio production, but you do the video. Aaron, you do the newsletter. And so I think this question is more relevant to you because I definitely have reached the maximum of my bandwidth. And so, but I like what's clear is that second nature needs to exist. And I think over the long term, it has the ability to be a very interesting business, even though we've yet to monetize it to this point. We've been really focused on just delivering cool content. I think you and I both really enjoy doing this. But of course, as we all know, that's not enough to like keep a project going long term. And so if second nature is to reach its potential, which is kind of the core of Mark's question here, we will have to figure out how, whether that's bringing in some extra help. You and I have had some interesting conversations about, what that might look like. It's probably too early to talk about that publicly, but the reality is that free trail's working and it requires full-time focus for me in order to continue it to work. And Super Rider is, also working, and it's in the early phases of really monetizing in the way that it can. And those things have occupied all of our attention, but we, at least I, and I'm sure you probably agree, we feel a momentum on second nature. And when you feel that, it makes it really fun to continue pushing and exploring on it. And so really the challenge then is like, well, how do we continue to explore that and keep the momentum going without taking our eye off the ball on the main thing for both of us, which is our respective consumer facing media brands. Not easy though. Not easy.
Not easy. And, it's hard to say too, like if we got to episode 50 and we didn't feel this momentum, would we still have the interest to move ahead? I think we've gotten the signals from everyone that this is something that people want. And, I think one other important thing with the Robin podcast, that opened the door, I think, to legitimacy with an even wider audience of potential guests. The
I
fact
agree.
that the CEO of Outside was on our podcast, like, I think a lot of people, that'll be the thing that gets shared and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool. They're talking to, yeah, this guy, then I'm in too." And I think, not to say that the other CEOs we've talked to are, anything else, but just I think that one really opened the door to even bigger conversations, even more people coming in the door, and it makes for a bit of a calling card as we continue to grow this. It makes it a little bit easier to continue growing in. And
Yeah.
I think you and I can see like where this is headed, and I think that's the exciting part, and that's what makes it easy to like keep pushing because, yeah, we just want to have like the highest quality podcast that we possibly can, and without like completely nuking ourselves in the
I
process.
agree. I mean, what did you say? The like path to legitimacy or something like that. I think we've had 4 CEOs on the show so far: Wazelle, Protect Our Winters, Normal, and Outside. And I think each of them brought really fun and unique insights, but certainly is also evidence that I think we can take confidence from that. Again, the product deserves to exist and it hasn't really existed in this type of way. And so, and I've had such a blast just sitting in on these conversations and participating. And really, the feels like the podcast is really just the starting point of something a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And that's the really the challenge is like, what is that bigger thing? And how do we move towards it in a way that doesn't put us both in a cemetery and that keeps our respective businesses in a healthy spot too. So, anyway, fun combo. Thanks for the question, Mark Jantosik. Really awesome AMA. That was really fun to that back and forth with Lutzi. And again, we're going to likely try and do that every 50 episodes, make that a tradition here. Let's close it down with BPC. You get us started. Maybe just to set it up, again, we have new listeners here. So BPC is our closing segment, brand product content, where Aaron and I take something that we noticed across those categories and share it with the audience. You get us started.
Okay, I've got two BPCs for today. I'm semi reluctant to do the first one, but I've got to admit that I was wrong. Okay.
I know where you're going. Okay.
I I I got some ketone IQ because have been talking about it so much, and I tried it and I tasted like gasoline. Dude, I was like, "What are you talking about? You told me to put it in the fridge to make it cold, it would taste better." No, I can't drink this stuff with a straight face. I'm sorry. So, I was off the ketone IQ train almost as quickly as I got on it. I think the product is interesting. I understand ketones, but wow. I then magically, through something else that I'm working on, got my hands on the new caffeine flavored ketone IQ. I got the peach one. And I was like, all right, let's see if this tastes like peach flavored gasoline. And to my surprise, it was delicious and amazing.
Hell
So
yeah.
I'm here to say I'm back on board. Okay, this stuff is legit. The energy that I did get from it, I actually felt this time. I think the first time around, I didn't feel it because I was just like, huh. But now that I can actually like get through the flavor and it actually tastes good.
Well,
The
that
thing,
peach one's caffeinated too.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I felt great.
Yeah, the
Um,
OG product's not caffeinated.
I mean, look, the thing is, when Red Bull first came out, they tried to fight the same battle where they said it's functional, not flavored. And they fought that for a really long time. I mean, thankfully, it tasted slightly better than gasoline, but they did have a lot of people not liking it. And the whole reason why Red Bull makes flavors now is that they did market research and heard everyone saying the number one barrier to entry for me buying this stuff is the flavor. And they're like, okay, cool. We'll just make flavored stuff now. And that solves the barrier to entry. And now that actually leads their innovation, right? They have their winter edition, their summer edition, and then the most popular ones go into the regular lineup. So I think Ketone IQ figured it out with flavored Ketone IQ. It's non-gasoline flavored, and I'm backing it now. So
That
there's
means
my, you know,
you reminded me 5 CEOs because we had Michael Brandt on
that's right.
the
That's
show
right.
too from Ketone IQ.
Okay, so really quick, my other one, I've got a book. I'm actually about halfway through this book right now. My buddy Miles suggested it to me. It's called Oversubscribed, and it's Daniel Priestley's the author, and it's really about just like setting yourself up in business so that more people want to like engage with you and do work with you than you have capacity to do. How do you get them to oversubscribe to whatever it is that you're offering? And it's just kind of a healthy reminder of like what are the things that people actually care about and how can you put yourself in the right position to tee that up. So I'm halfway through. I'm not all the way through, but it's been a pretty good book so far.
Cool. Oversubscribe. We'll put it on the list. I've been looking for my Daily Stoic book. I've had a hard time finding it.
I'll send you another one.
Well, I all right. Before you do, give me a couple more days to try and track that thing down. All right, cool. Yeah, when you said I'm reluctant to share one of them, I thought you were going with the Logan Paul or Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight.
No, that's happening tonight. So I guess by the time this comes out, we'll know if what happened.
All right.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can edit that out if it feels necessary. All right. Closing us down here, my BPC, one of the sport properties that has inspired me most in the last 5 years is the Premier Lacrosse League, which was founded by Paul Rabel, who's effectively the LeBron James of lacrosse. He's about my age, which is depressing because he's already the commissioner of a successful professional sports league. But he's been a massive inspiration for me ever since I was really like in high school and college, also playing the game of lacrosse. I think the PLL is one of the best new modern sports products that there is. They have incredible depth of talent. The competition is always like very interesting and they are innovative and they're sort of instrumental, at least from my perspective, in getting lacrosse included in, I think it's the LA Olympics that they're going to be playing, even though it's like kind of a non-traditional lacrosse format. It's great for the game. I generally think lacrosse is one of the most underappreciated sports in the world because it has physicality and it has finesse. It's a game of momentum. It's often like really exciting. And the PLL, I think, is the best lacrosse product out there. The reason I wanted to include it is this week they announced the founding of the Women's Lacrosse League, the WLL. I'm not entirely sure what the ownership structure of this looks like, but in 2025, they are going to launch a 4-team. Seems like they're going to start with kind of a championship tournament format to get this off the ground. But extending our conversation, which we've had over many episodes of the rise of women's sports, this is more evidence of that. And of course, as we mentioned in our Wazell conversation and our comments on Alexis Ohanian and his investment in professional women's soccer and track and field, it's not a philanthropic endeavor. Like, obviously, this is a good thing to do and the right thing to do, but also they're probably tapping into a valuable consumer and a new audience that will probably ultimately grow the PLL business. So the WLL, the Women's Lacrosse League, that's my BPC for the week. Any comments on that?
That's so awesome. And
Yeah.
and I think you and I were talking beforehand, but there wasn't a women's lacrosse league of any sort that was pro caliber, right? Like this
No.
is brand new. That this is like a full on 0-1 opportunity for women who played elite in college, and now they get a chance to carry it on in like an actual career.
Yep.
Huge.
And the PLL and Paul Rabel has in some way inspired the Secret Project. You know that story, Aaron. We'll tell that eventually.
Yes.
Cliffhanger to end the episode. Closing comments from you, Aaron?
I can't wait to see you. I'm a couple days out, and I'm so pumped just to hang out in person. We get to talk to each other on the internet all the time, and to do it face to face would be kind of sweet.
Hell yeah. Can't wait to see you, buddy. To our listeners, make sure you go subscribe to the newsletter, which Aaron puts together every single week, secondnature.media. Follow us on LinkedIn, where we just eclipsed, was it 5,000 followers on LinkedIn?
We're over 5K.
Over 5K there on my favorite social media platform. So go give us a like and follow over there. Comment on our YouTube, right, Aaron?
Oh yeah, that's like the best thing you can do other than watching it on your TV.
Maybe what we should do is start reading YouTube comments in the show.
I'm in.
Okay, there you go. All right, so go comment on the YouTube. What am I forgetting?
Slack.
Instagram and Slack.
Yep.
Okay.
We talked a lot about Slack, but it's definitely, I know we're biased, but I really think the Slack channel is kind of where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be interesting businesses that come out of that.
Yeah.
Like people who find each other. So jump in there to our listeners. All the links that you that of everything that we've talked about are going to be in the show notes of today's episode. So go click through and follow along. For Aaron Luzzi, I'm Debo. Catch you next time. Peace out.